The great hall stretched like a cavern of steel and stone reaching far into shadows where no light could touch, and from the high ceiling hung banners of alien tribes, each marked with fangs, claws, or wings, and each banner told of victories in hunts across the stars, and the crowd below stood in silence as a massive hologram flickered to life in the very center of the chamber, glowing in harsh colors of red and gold. It was the Predator hierarchy, a grand display known across the galaxy for countless generations. It showed the order of dominance among the hunters of the cosmos. Each level held the name of a species, ranked by strength and cunning, and each step was won by blood and terror and loss. And here, in this hall, no one dared question its design, for the chart was law, and law was survival. At the very top burned the image of the apex, the largest of them all, a beast with jagged horns and armor. Like stone plates, its shadow cast fear even through the hologram, and below it were the second tier, the clawed reptiles of the blood swamps, the winged hunters of the ash clouds, and the armored giants of the frost worlds, each face glowing with a cruel pride. And down below them, row after row, smaller predators stood ranked in order, each one fierce, each one certain of their place. And then at the very bottom, lower than the scavengers and vermin, lower than even creatures barely counted as hunters, there appeared a new symbol, tiny, dim, and almost fading from view, the symbol of Earth, the symbol of human beings. The crowd murmured with cruel delight, for this was a moment of spectacle, and many predators had gathered here for the ceremony of display, and judgment whispers ran through the gathering like cold wind. They called the human weak. They said the human did not belong here. They laughed that a prey animal had been allowed into the hall at all, and their words echoed across the chamber in every tongue. From the entrance, a small figure stepped forward into the light. It was the human cadet, a figure smaller than the beasts around him, smaller than the scaled hunters, who towered at twice his height, smaller than the winged shadows, whose wings folded like blades across their backs. He walked without armor, without claws, without horns, only the thin uniform of the academy, and eyes that seemed far too calm for one standing among monsters. The predators watched with growing hunger, waiting for him to tremble, waiting for him to look up at the glowing chart and bow his head in shame, waiting for him to know his place at the bottom of the hierarchy. But the human did not bow. He did not tremble. He stood still and stared at the glowing ranks of predators, and his silence began to feel heavier than their laughter. The hologram pulsed brighter, as if mocking him. The apex face glared down the chart, seemed alive with cruelty, every row of hunters sneering at the lone human figure. But the human's gaze did not break. His eyes traced the chart line by line, as if reading a simple map, as if solving a puzzle, and not one sign of fear showed on his face. The hall grew restless. Claws tapped on stone, wings shifted with impatience, armored tails thrashed against the floor. They wanted him to kneel, to scream, to show weakness. Yet nothing came, and in that nothingness a strange tension rose, like the slow tightening of a wire one breath from snapping. A massive scaled predator broke the silence, its voice deep like rolling thunder. It mocked the human, saying, "Your kind are prey, nothing more. Your place is below even the scavengers. You are soft meat that bleeds easily. You will be hunted and forgotten." And the crowd roared with laughter, joining the insult with growls and screeches. But the human did not answer. He simply kept his eyes on the chart, as though the predator's words were distant echoes, as though the chart itself spoke louder than the threats around him. And when at last he opened his mouth, his voice was calm, and even it carried not anger, not fear, but a strange certainty. "This hierarchy is broken," he said, and the hall froze at those words. Every predator turned toward him, shocked that prey dared to speak so boldly. The human's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Let me fix it," he said, without hesitation, without doubt, as if it was not a challenge, but a simple task waiting to be done. Gasps rippled across the chamber, wings folded tighter, claws curled into fists, and tails lashed with fury. The predators could not believe what they had heard, yet the human stood there small and unarmed before their sacred chart, and his eyes did not waver. The great hall that moments ago roared with laughter now fell into a silence deep and sharp, for something had shifted in the air, something none of them could yet name, but all of them could feel. The hall did not move. The silence grew heavier than stone as the human words echoed in the chamber, and every predator felt a sting deep inside, for no one had ever spoken against the sacred hierarchy. Not even the strongest dared to call it broken. And yet here stood a fragile human cadet, with no armor, no claws, no scales, and no weapons, his voice calm, his eyes steady, and his words sharp enough to wound pride. The scaled beast that had mocked him earlier took a step forward, its claws scraping the stone floor, sparks flying with each step, its jaws opened wide, showing rows of teeth meant to tear prey apart, and it leaned down until its eyes glowed close to the human face, and its voice rolled like thunder as it said, "You dare call the order, false, you dare claim power, where you have none." The crowd leaned closer, hungry for blood, their bodies shaking with excitement. Some thumped their tails against the floor, some hissed through sharp teeth, some flapped their wings impatiently. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted the tiny human to scream or beg. They wanted to see the law of prey confirmed with blood. Yet the human did not move. He did not step back. He did not lower his gaze. Instead, he tilted his head and studied the massive predator as though observing a puzzle piece that did not fit. The beast snarled again and raised its arm-wide claws, stretching ready to strike down the foolish cadet, and the crowd leaned forward to see the moment of judgment. But before the blow could fall, the human spoke again, his voice not loud, but strong enough to halt the air between them. "This order you worship is blind," he said. "It is built only on size, and on strength, and on fear. But strength alone blinds you. It makes you careless. It makes you weak." Gasps rushed across the hall. Never before had prey lectured predator. Never before had a weakling spoken to giants like a teacher. To children the scaled beast roared in rage, its breath hot, its muscles surging with fury. It swung its claw down in a strike meant to cleave the human in two. But the human did not fight strength with strength. Instead, he shifted his weight lightly, his foot sliding back, his body turning with a calm precision, and the claw missed by the width of a breath. The predator staggered, confused by the emptiness where the prey should have been, and in that moment the human stepped forward, gripped the beast's arm, twisted his body with perfect balance, and the scaled monster crashed to the ground, its body shaking the chamber. With the force of its fall, the crowd shrieked in disbelief. The human did not gloat. He did not roar in victory. He only stepped back with calm eyes and said, "Your law cannot measure what you cannot see." The silence cracked like ice under weight, then broke into chaos. Predators roared and shouted. Others laughed in wild disbelief. Some hissed that the human cheated. Others whispered that something strange had been shown, but none could deny what they had seen: a predator twice the size of the human thrown to the ground, not by strength, not by brute force, but by timing, by leverage, and by thought. The leaders of the hall stirred in their high seats, their wings folded tight, their claws gripping the stone arms of their thrones. They were unsettled, for the hierarchy had never been tested in such a way. Prey had always died when placed at the bottom. Yet here stood a human, calm and untouched, and with each moment the order of things trembled. Another predator leapt forward, unable to stand the insult, a winged hunter, whose claws were curved like blades, and whose wings stretched wide like sails of shadow. It landed before the human, its feathers bristling, and its eyes sharp as obsidian. It spread its wings, and hissed, "You dare undo the law, you will fall beneath the wind." The crowd roared approval, eager for more blood. The winged hunter charged faster than most eyes could follow, its claws flashing down. Yet again the human did not meet power with power. He shifted just enough so the strike cut through air. His hand touched the wing at a single point of balance, and with one motion he guided the hunter's own speed against it. The winged beast stumbled forward, crashing to the ground, its feathers scattering across the stone. Laughter mixed with roars. Some predators cried in rage, others in shock. But none could deny the sight. Again, a larger, faster predator, defeated not by strength, but by something else, something alien to them, something they could not yet name. The human stood alone in the center of the chaos, his breathing steady, his face calm, his eyes on the glowing chart above, and he said again, "This hierarchy is broken," and each word struck like a hammer against ancient walls. A third challenger stormed forth, an armored giant from the frost worlds, its body covered in thick plates of ice bone, its arms like hammers that had shattered stone cities. It towered over the human 3 times his size, and roared loud enough to shake dust from the ceiling. It said, "Your words are nothing, your tricks are nothing. I will crush you and silence your madness." The giant swung down, both arms heavy as falling mountains. The ground cracked with the weight of the blow. Yet the human was already gone, moving with speed that came not from power, but from anticipation. He had read the movement before it began. He had seen the giant's pride, the way its body carried its weight. And when the strike hit the ground empty, the human stepped into the opening, his hands pressing against a joint, unarmored and soft. The giant collapsed forward, forced to its knees, its weight no longer weapon, but a prison trapping itself on the floor. The chamber shook with shock. Predators screamed, some howled, that it was impossible, some hissed, that it was trickery, others whispered low that perhaps it was something else, something hidden in the human mind, something they had never seen in all their hunts. The human walked away from the fallen giant and raised his eyes once more to the glowing chart. The predators waited for him to collapse, for him to break, but his voice came again, calm, certain, and sharp, like the edge of truth. You have mistaken order for change, you have mistaken fear for law, you have mistaken size for destiny. The leaders of the hall could no longer sit still. They rose from their seats, their forms casting long shadows across the chamber. The apex leader at the very top glared down with burning eyes, its horns jagged, its teeth gleaming, and its voice booming across the chamber. It said, "If you claim our law is false, then face me at the peak, face the top, and let your lies break beneath true power." The crowd roared, shaking the walls with their voices. The predators demanded blood, they demanded judgment, they demanded to see the human destroyed. Yet the human stood still, no fear in his body, no tremor in his voice. He simply looked up at the apex and said, "I will." The hall thundered with voices as the apex rose from its throne, its vast body wrapped in plates of bone and horn, its eyes burning with fire older than any world. The air trembled with its steps, each footfall shaking the stone beneath, as though the planet itself bent to its will, and every predator bowed in respect or fear. Yet the human stood in the open floor, silent and unmoved, his eyes fixed on the apex, as if he were measuring not the size of the beast, but the rhythm of its breath and the weight of its stride. The apex spoke, its voice booming like storms across oceans. It said, "Little one, you have dared to wound my order, you have dared to tear cracks into the law that shapes the hunters of this galaxy. You will face me now, and your blood will close those cracks, and your bones will remind the galaxy that no prey survives the top." And the crowd roared with savage joy at the words, their wings beating their tails, lashing their teeth, clashing together like iron blades. The human did not reply with threat or boast. He only took one step forward, his posture straight, his eyes calm, and his voice even as he said, "I accept." The chamber hushed, as if the air itself feared to move, for this was madness. No prey had ever spoken so to the apex, no creature so small had ever dared to take that challenge. The apex leapt from its throne, crashing down upon the floor, the impact shaking dust from the high ceiling. The ground split beneath its weight, claws like scythes tore gouges into the stone, its horns gleamed, and its roar carried enough force to make lesser predators collapse to their knees. The human did not kneel, the human did not bow. He stood like a stone against the storm, and he raised his hands, not in prayer, not in surrender, but ready to move, ready to strike. The apex charged forward faster than its size should allow, its claws sweeping wide enough to cleave a transport vessel in two, its horns lowered to impale its prey, its weight enough to crush any being foolish enough to stand before it. The crowd screamed with joy, their voices echoing in the vast chamber, for they knew this would be the end of the human experiment. This would be the moment the chart remained intact. Yet the human did not freeze. He watched with eyes that saw more than size, more than claws. He watched the rhythm of the apex shoulders, the shift of its weight across the floor, the way its left claw rose a breath higher than the right, and he moved at the last instant, his body sliding low, his hand brushing against the floor, his legs carrying him past the edge of the strike, and the claws tore through nothing but air. The apex roared, confused by the emptiness of its blow. It swung again, the other claw sweeping down with enough force to break the ground in two. But again the human moved, slipping under the arc, stepping where the weight shifted, placing his body not against the storm, but alongside it, and guiding it past him, as though the massive predator was already defeated by its own momentum. The hall gasped in disbelief. The human waited until the third strike came, a horn thrust aimed to impale him through the chest, and in that moment he turned with quiet precision, his hand pressed against the horn, his body twisting at the perfect angle. The beast thundered forward, its own strength carrying it past balance, and the human used that force against it, and the apex stumbled, crashing one knee to the stone, the sound booming like a mountain breaking. The crowd howled in rage and awe. Some predators screeched that it was trickery, others shouted that the human was blessed by strange powers. Yet the truth was clear the apex had been forced to the ground by a creature so small that even vermin outgrew him. In the wilds the human stood a step away, his body calm, his breath, even his eyes, watching every movement of the fallen giant. The apex rose again, fury blazing hotter than suns, its voice shaking the hall. With rage, no prey defies me, no prey survives me, no prey escapes me. And it swung both claws downward together, like twin hammers. But the human had already stepped to the side. The claws smashed the stone floor, and cracks spread like lightning across the chamber walls. Dust fell like snow, but the human remained untouched, his movements a dance of quiet calculation. The apex roared again, swinging with speed beyond belief, its tail sweeping like a battering ram, its wings slamming with the force of storms. Yet the human wove through every strike, his body bending, sliding, turning with such precision that the attacks seemed to strike not him, but empty echoes. And with each miss the apex grew heavier, its rage making it blind, its fury making it slower. The human saw the weakness, the flaw, not in the body of the apex, but in its pride. It struck with endless power, never pausing, never guarding, never thinking, for no one had ever forced it to think, and that blindness was the opening the human had been waiting for. As the apex lunged again, the human stepped forward. Instead of back, his hand reached the joint where the massive claw met the arm. His weight shifted with perfect timing, his legs bent, his body turned, and the apex body followed its own momentum, pulled by the force of its own strike, and the human redirected it. With the smallest push, the largest beast in the galaxy crashed to the ground, its face slamming into stone, the impact shaking the hall so hard banners fell from the ceiling and torches flickered against the walls. The predators shrieked in disbelief, wings flapped wildly, tails slammed against stone, jaws snapped with outrage. But none could deny what they had seen. Their god of dominance, their symbol of law, their apex, had been forced to the ground by a human cadet who stood calm and unshaken in the middle of chaos. The apex rose once more, its body bruised, its pride torn, its voice now quieter, yet colder than ice. It said, "You are no prey." And the words rolled across the chamber like thunder turning into silence, for no predator had ever spoken those words to one marked as prey, and every creature in the hall felt the weight of that truth. The human did not answer with pride. He did not roar like the predators. He only looked once more at the glowing chart above, and then back at the apex, and he said, "You see it too, this order is broken." The crowd erupted, some screaming denial, others whispering awe, yet the truth could not be erased. The first strike had been made not by claws, not by teeth, not by horns, but by a human who fought with thought and timing and patience. And in that moment the sacred law of predators cracked deeper than ever before, and every creature in the hall knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The hall quaked with voices as the apex pulled itself upright again, rage burning in its eyes, yet also a shadow of something no predator had ever admitted before: hesitation. The crowd no longer roared with simple delight. Now their voices clashed together. Some screamed for the apex to crush the human once and for all, others whispered in fear that the unthinkable had already happened, and the chart above them flickered as though uncertain of its own design. The human stood still in the center, his breathing steady, his body calm as if nothing extraordinary had passed, and that calmness only deepened the unease spreading through the chamber. One of the blood-scaled hunters broke free from the circle, unable to stand the insult any longer. Its body rippled with muscles, its claws dripped venom that could melt stone, its eyes glowed like fire, and it shrieked across the hall, "You dare twist our order, you dare humiliate our apex, I will shred you apart and make your bones a warning to every world that remembers this day." The creature lunged forward with speed that tore the air around it. The crowd gasped, eager for blood again. The human did not retreat. He watched the predator with eyes that measured rhythm more than size. He saw the way its feet struck too heavily on the left, the way its tail lagged behind the rest of its charge, the way its fury blinded its aim, and he moved only when the strike came, claws flashing to tear his chest apart. His body tilted, his arm guided the weight, and the beast fell past balance, its own strength dragging it sideways, and the human shoulder pushed at the perfect angle. The predator slammed into the stone floor, venom splattering harmless across the tiles, its roar silenced by its own defeat. Another predator burst forward, this one feathered and sleek, wings cutting through the air like razors, its beak sharp enough to pierce steel, its cry splitting the ears of all who listened. It circled once above the human, then dove with talons outstretched, ready to rip him apart. But the human raised his eyes and tracked the angle of descent. He shifted one step, his hand rose to meet the wing, not to stop it with power, but to change its course, and the predator found itself spiraling into the ground, feathers scattering in shame. The hall turned. Wild predators surged forward, some driven by rage, others by desperate need to prove the hierarchy true. The human became the eye of a storm of teeth and claws and wings, yet he did not falter. He slipped through every strike, like water flowing around rocks, each predator larger, each predator faster, yet each one fell to the same unseen weapon: thought, timing, balance, and patience. The crowd screamed louder, some in disbelief, others in awe. Each fall of a predator was another fracture in the sacred order. The chart above flickered again, lines of light blurring, as if the system itself struggled to hold shape under the weight of truth. One by one the challengers fell, not slain, not broken, but defeated by their own blindness, forced to see that size and claws meant little against calm eyes and quick steps. A towering frost giant charged next, its body clad in plates of ice, its roar shaking dust from the high ceiling. It swung both fists like avalanches, yet the human saw the opening in the rhythm of its strike. He slid close instead of far, his body pressing into the gap where the arms could not protect the giant's chest. His push guided the avalanche past him, and the giant crashed to its knees, breath torn from its chest. The crowd howled in disbelief. Then came a serpent predator, long and coiled scales glittering with poison. It struck like lightning, its fangs aimed at the human's throat, yet the human leaned just enough, its strike grazing past harmlessly, his hand pressed beneath, its jaw guiding the force. Downward the serpent slammed into the floor and writhed in shame, its coils collapsing in knots of failure. More came, furious, more desperate, a storm of bodies around the human, claws and wings and tails striking from every direction. Yet he flowed through the chaos, never faster than he needed, never stronger than he was, only precise, always precise, until the floor of the great hall was littered with predators, panting, bruised, and silent, no longer roaring, no longer laughing. The leaders in their high seats no longer looked proud, their claws dug into stone, their eyes shifting uneasily among each other, for the law that had ruled for ages trembled before a single human cadet, unarmed, unarmored, unafraid, and still standing calm in the middle of the ruin. The apex roared again, though this time its voice no longer carried only rage. It carried something deeper, something older, fear. It thundered across the chamber. Enough. He is not prey. He is not hunter. He is nothing. He is a trick. And the crowd tried to cheer, but their voices cracked, for the image of defeat was too clear. The human had already undone the foundation of their faith. The hologram chart above flickered violently, ranks shifting, lines blurring, species names glowing and fading as if uncertain of their place. The human looked up at it, his voice calm as ever. He said, "Your law is made of chains, each chain holding you blind, each chain binding you to fear. You think it gives strength, but it only hides weakness. You see now with your own eyes." The silence that followed was more powerful than the roars before. The predators who had laughed now kept their jaws closed. The predators who had mocked now looked away from the human figure, who stood alone yet unbeaten. The chain reaction had begun. The fall of one predator had sparked the fall of another and another, until the entire order crumbled like dust under the weight of truth. The apex growled, stepping forward again, its horns lowering as if to strike one last time, yet its steps were slower, now heavier. Its pride, wounded too deeply to hide the human, turned his gaze upon it unflinching, and said, "I told you the hierarchy is broken." The chart above shattered into fragments of light, the glowing order splitting apart until nothing but sparks remained, drifting down like dying stars onto the chamber floor. The predators looked up in all, their faith scattered across the air. The human stood beneath it, untouched by doubt, and in that moment every predator present knew the world had changed. They had seen prey rise above hunter. They had seen strength undone by patience. They had seen the law itself torn apart, not by claws, not by blood, but by a single mind, and they knew the chain could not be reforged. The fracture would spread across worlds, across stars, across every hunt. The chain reaction would not stop here. It had only begun. The chamber had fallen into a silence that no predator had ever known, silence heavy enough to crush the air from lungs, silence that wrapped around the fallen hunters who lay scattered across the floor, silence that echoed in the hearts of all who watched the human still standing alone, unbroken, untouched, the chart above shattered into drifting sparks of fading light. And yet within that silence a new sound rose, the sound of heavy steps, the sound of horns. Dragging against the stone, the apex moved forward again, slower now, but not weaker. Its fury burned hotter than suns, its pride wounded deeper than any wound of flesh, and it would not allow the law to collapse without one final battle. The apex towered above the human shadows, stretching across the hall like the wings of death, its body a mountain of muscle and armor, its eyes twin storms of rage and humiliation. It spoke, and its voice thundered like worlds, breaking the hierarchy. Cannot end, it roared. It is carved into the blood of every predator. It is the law of stars, and prey cannot erase it with tricks. Your kind cannot undo the bones of ages. The human looked up, his face calm, his voice steady and clear. You think law comes from size, you think power comes from fear, but both are cages, cages that bind you more than they bind prey. You cannot see that the chain you worship drags you down, not forward, and you will see it now. The apex bellowed and charged. The ground shook with each step. The floor cracked beneath its claws. Banners shook from the ceiling. The air filled with the roar of a predator who had never known defeat, and the crowd trembled with both terror and awe. For this was the moment they had waited for, the final strike, the turning of all fate, the clash that would decide the truth of law and the truth of survival. The human did not run. He stepped forward instead into the storm. He watched the rhythm of the apex shoulders, the shift of its hips, the tilt of its horns. He saw not the monster before him, but the pattern of its movements, the flaw in its pride, the weight that carried it too far. He let the storm come, and he slid through it, his hand grazing the horn, his body turning with the flow, and the apex roared in shock as its own force carried it off balance again. The crowd gasped louder, their disbelief echoing against the walls. The apex turned faster this time, no hesitation. Claws swept low, wings struck high, its tail whipped across like a thunder lash. The human moved like water flowing around rock, every strike sliding past him, every blow turned against its source. His hands pressed at joints, his weight shifted at perfect times, and the apex stumbled with each furious move, its rage making it blind, its strength making it clumsy. At last the apex paused, chest heaving, breath like storms, eyes burning with shame. It had never fought so long, never felt so many empty strikes, never faced prey that did not break, and the silence of the crowd carved deeper wounds than any claw. The apex bared its teeth, its voice cracking with fury. I will not fall to you. I am the law. I am the chain. I am the top, and you are nothing. The human raised his eyes and spoke, not with anger, not with boast, but with the calm of truth. You are strong, but blind. You are feared, but trapped. You are the top of nothing but your own cage, and today that cage breaks. With a roar that shattered the air, the apex charged again, claws descending like hammers, wings flaring like burning sails. The human stepped inside the strike, his body turning with quiet precision, his hand pressing the joint, his weight guiding the storm, and the apex crashed down to one knee, the ground splitting beneath its weight, banners falling, torches flickering, the chamber trembling as if the stars themselves shook. The crowd shrieked, some cried out that it was impossible, others whispered that it was truth. They watched as the human, small, unarmed, unarmored, placed his hand against the horn of the greatest predator in the galaxy and pressed it into the stone, not with force, not with might, but with precision, balance, timing. The apex roared and struggled, but its body betrayed it, its strength worked against it, and the chamber saw what it had never seen before, the apex on its knees. The silence that followed was the heaviest of all. Predators stared wide-eyed, wings folded, claws hung useless, tails drooped. The law had fallen before their eyes. The human stood calm, his voice carrying across the hall for all to hear. You see now, the chain is broken. The law you worship is weakness dressed as strength. You fear it, but it is already gone. The apex panted, its eyes burning with denial, yet deep inside the fire flickered with doubt. Its claws scraped the floor, but did not rise. Its wings twitched, but did not strike. And the human released its horn, stepping back with calm grace. He had no need to finish what was already ended. The chart above flickered once more, its fragments scattering into fading sparks like falling stars across the hall. Predators watched with awe as the light died, leaving no order, no ranking, only empty space. Above them the silence carried the truth into their hearts, the truth that prey had stood against the strongest and prevailed, the truth that the law of claws and fangs had cracked beyond repair, the truth that the world they knew had ended in this hall. The leaders who once sat in pride no longer looked down with certainty. Their claws gripped their thrones, in fear their eyes avoided the human, standing small yet vast in presence unshaken. Among ruins the crowd no longer laughed, no longer roared their voices gone, their faith scattered. The apex lowered its gaze, not in surrender, not in speech, but in silence, a silence heavier than all its roars. The human looked at it, then looked at the crowd, his voice soft, yet clear enough to be heard in every corner. You built a ladder, and called it law. You climbed it, and called it strength. But ladders break, chains rust, and law built on fear always shatters. The predators remained still, no challenge came, no voice rose against him. The turning point had been reached. The law of the hunters was undone by one who refused to play its game, and every creature in the hall felt the shift within themselves. Some feared it, some hated it, some were drawn to it, but none could deny it. The human stood alone, yet in that moment he carried more weight than all the predators. Combined his calm presence, a new kind of order, not born of chains, not born of claws, but born of choice and balance, and thought. The chamber that once echoed with roars of pride now held only the sound of change, the turning point of an age. The broken chart still flickered above the chamber, its fragments of light drifting like dying stars across the floor, and the predators stared upward, their eyes wide, their claws restless, their wings folding tight around their bodies, for they had never seen such a sight. They had never seen the law itself collapse. Before their eyes the apex knelt low, its massive horns bowed to the stone, its body heaving with rage and confusion, its silence louder than thunder, and the hall waited for what would come next. The human stepped forward, his face calm, his breath steady, his movements quiet yet certain. He walked beneath the fading light of the shattered chart and lifted his eyes, as if studying not just the broken order above, but the shape of the new one that must replace it. He raised his voice, and it carried across the chamber, not loud, not furious, but steady as a river flowing through stone. You built a chart of hunters and prey, he said. You built it to control yourselves. You built it to bind each other in chains of fear. You called it strength, but it was only blindness. You worshipped size and claws and fangs, but you never saw the flaw. You never saw that fear eats strength from within. You never saw that chains weaken those who wear them. The crowd stirred, voices hissing, wings rustling, claws scraping stones. Some growled that the human spoke lies, others whispered that his words cut deeper than any claw, yet none moved against him, none dared to rise, for the memory of his victories still burned before their eyes, the memory of predator after predator, falling not to brute force, but to patience, to thought, to calm. The human lifted his hand toward the chart above, and the fragments of light responded to him, glowing brighter, as though his words gave them new form. He spoke again. This hierarchy is broken. It cannot be repaired. It must be erased, because true strength is not measured by rank. True strength is not measured by who stands on top. True strength is measured by how one rises when the world presses down. True strength is measured by how one chooses not to chain another, but to break the chain itself. Gasps rippled across the chamber, for never had such words been spoken. Never had any dared to suggest the chart itself was false. Yet they had seen it shattered. They had seen it undone before their own eyes, and the truth of his voice spread like fire through dry grass. The apex lifted its head, its eyes glowing with fading fury. It growled low. You speak like one above all, like one who believes himself beyond the law. Do you claim to stand outside the order? Do you claim to be more than predator, more than prey? The human looked at the apex with calm and nodded. Once we do not belong inside your ladder, he said. We do not belong in your chain. We are not below you. We are not above you. We are outside your law. We do not live by ranks. We build our own path, and it cannot be measured by your chart. The hall froze at those words. The idea itself was a storm they could not grasp. Outside the chart, outside the order, outside the very law that bound their lives, the predators shivered in fear and awe, for such freedom was unknown to them. Freedom to exist without a rank, freedom to walk without chains, freedom to face the strongest without needing to be stronger, only to be wiser, only to be patient. The human turned and stepped toward the center, where the base of the hologram pulsed faintly with dying light. He placed his hand against it, and the fragments above shifted. Once more the glowing ranks collapsed entirely, until no names, no lines, no levels remained, only a single bright light, standing alone in the void. Then the light expanded, not upward, not downward, but outward across the chamber, until the entire hall glowed with equal radiance. This is the truth, he said. There is no ladder, no top, no bottom. There's only choice to rise, choice to learn, choice to change. You feared that if chains were broken, chaos would rule. But look around you, the chain was chaos. The chain blinded you to all paths. But one now those paths are open. The predators stared at the new light. Some trembled their claws, digging into stone. Some cried out in denial, their voices cracking. Some lowered their heads, as if ashamed, yet all of them felt the weight of what had been shown, the chart that defined their existence, gone, replaced by a vision that none had words to name. The apex growled once more, but its growl lacked the fire it once held. Its body sagged under the weight of its own doubt. It lowered its gaze again and said, "You have undone what was older than stars. You have broken what no one dared touch. What will remain when fear is gone? What will guide when the chain is shattered?" The human looked at it calmly and answered, "What remains is choice. What guides is balance. What protects is thought, not fear. You feared prey, you feared loss, you feared weakness. But fear built nothing, only chains. Thought builds strength, thought builds paths, thought builds freedom." The crowd shifted again, whispers rolling like waves across the chamber. The younger hunters looked at the human with wide eyes, as if they saw something greater than they had ever imagined. The older predators growled, uncertain, torn between hate and awe. The leaders sat frozen, their claws trembling against the arms of their thrones, their eyes unable to look away from the truth that filled the chamber. The human stepped back from the glowing core. The light spread brighter, filling every shadow of the hall, until the predators were bathed in it, their fangs and claws gleaming, their eyes reflecting more than rage. For the first time, they reflected doubt and reflection, and the faint glimmer of something else, curiosity. "You feared that prey would rise above you," the human said. "You feared that without change you would fall into chaos. But look, the prey has risen, not to rule you, but to free you from blindness. We do not seek to stand on top, we seek only to stand free. And in that freedom we are stronger than any chain can hold." The silence after those words was long, deeper than all the silences before. The predators did not roar, did not hiss, did not laugh. They only stared, their bodies frozen, their minds caught between the law they had worshipped and the truth they could not deny. The fix had been made, the chart was gone, the chain broken, and something new had taken its place. The apex bowed its head low, its horns scraping the stone, not in surrender, not in worship, but in acknowledgement. Its voice came low and rough. "Your kind will not be forgotten. Your words will not be erased. The chain is broken, and none can rebuild it." The human gave no smile, no roar of victory. He only turned his eyes to the light above and stood still, calm, steady, certain, as though his work was not to conquer, but to reveal, not to rule, but to fix. And the predators knew in that moment that the hierarchy would never return. The fix was complete. The galaxy itself would carry its echo. The hall lay quiet under the pale glow of the new light, silence thick and heavy, silence deeper than the roar of battle, silence that pressed against the hearts of every predator gathered within these walls, silence so complete that the faint sound of the human's breath seemed to echo across the chamber. The apex remained kneeling, its horns lowered, its massive frame trembling with more than exhaustion, trembling with the weight of a truth it could not crush. And the leaders on their thrones sat frozen, their claws trembling against cold stone, their wings folded tight, their eyes wide with a fear they had never known before. The predators who had once laughed and roared now stared at the small figure standing alone in the center of the chamber. No claws, no armor, no wings, no fangs, only calm eyes and steady breath, only patience and certainty, only the strength to face what none of them had dared face. And in that silence they saw something that unsettled them more than defeat. They saw the end of the old order and the beginning of something they could not name. The human raised his gaze to the ceiling where the broken fragments of the hierarchy drifted like dust of dying stars. The old chart gone, erased from their world, erased from their minds. The light now filled the hall, equally touching every predator, without ranks, without levels, without chains. And the human spoke again, his voice steady and clear, carried into every corner like water filling cracks. "This is the silence of freedom," he said. "This is what you feared. You thought without the chart there would be nothing but chaos. Yet you feel now there is still order, not an order of chains, not an order of fear, but an order of choice. You are no longer bound. You are no longer trapped. You are no longer blind. You are free." The words spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Some lowered their heads, unable to face the weight of truth. Some trembled, their claws scraping the floor. Others whispered in voices they barely recognized, their own voices, filled with awe instead of rage, with fear instead of arrogance. with questions. Instead of certainty, the silence was not emptiness, it was awakening. The apex lifted its head slowly, its eyes burning, but softer now, its voice rough, yet quiet. The silence is heavy, it said, it crushes. Like mountains, it strips me of what I was. If there's no law, no chain, no chart, then what am I? What is predator? What is prey? What is the meaning of our strength? The human looked at the apex unflinching, and answered, you are what you choose to be, not what a chart names you, not what fear commands you. Strength is not in standing above another, strength is in standing without the need to measure yourself against another. Your strength is what you do, not what you rank. The apex roared low, a roar not of rage, but of pain. Its claws dug into the floor, as if seeking anchors. In a storm, its wings shook as though ready to tear themselves apart. Yet even in its roar, the hall heard the sound of truth. The greatest predator broken not by claws, but by words, not by wounds, but by awakening. One of the younger hunters stepped forward, its scales still bright, its wings not yet scarred by war, its voice trembling yet loud enough to carry. If the chart is gone, then I am not bound to the bottom, then I am not doomed to be nothing, then I may rise not by fear, but by choice. The hall stirred again, whispers rolling like a wave across the predators. More voices followed, some shouted that it was madness, others that it was hope, some cried that without ranks their world would end, others whispered that perhaps their world had just begun. The silence shifted, no longer only heavy, now filled with questions, filled with thoughts that had never been allowed. The human stood in the center, calm as always, not pushing, not demanding, only present, only steady, and his presence itself was enough to guide them. His silence was stronger than their roars, his calm stronger than their claws, his patience stronger than their fear. The silence after was no longer emptiness, it was the soil of change. The leaders of the hall finally rose, their eyes weary, their bodies tense. One spoke, its voice cracked and trembling, what you have done cannot be undone. The chart is gone, the law is gone, but you must know the galaxy will not forget, it will fear you, it will resist you, it will hate you. The human turned to them, his gaze unbroken, his voice calm. They may fear, but fear fades. They may resist, but resistance breaks. They may hate, but hate cannot stand forever against truth. I did not come to rule you. I did not come to destroy you. I came to show you that the chain was always broken, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The leaders bowed their heads, not in surrender, but in grim acknowledgement, for they too knew the truth. Once seen could not be unseen, once felt could not be erased. The silence of freedom could not be drowned out by old roars of law. The apex rose slowly, at last, its body still mighty, yet its pride torn, its voice deep, yet quieter than before. It looked down at the human and said, you are not prey, you are not predator, you are something else, something beyond the law, something outside the chain. And the hall shook with the weight of the words. The human gave no boast, gave no roar. He simply looked back with eyes calm and steady and said, we are human, and that was enough. The silence deepened again, yet it was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of recognition. The predators shifted uneasily, but no one moved against him, no one mocked, no one laughed, no one roared. The silence after was not emptiness, it was change, it was the sound of an age ending and another beginning. The hall that once echoed with violence now stood quiet. The predators who once lived by claw and chain now sat in stillness, and the human walked slowly to the center of the light, standing beneath it, as though he were not a conqueror, but only a mirror reflecting what had always been there. And in that moment the silence became eternal, the silence became the new law. For the predators knew they would never again see the world as they had before. They knew the chart would never return. They knew the human had fixed what they thought unbreakable, not by strength, not by blood, but by truth and calm and patience. And in that silence the galaxy itself shifted. The silence after was the beginning of everything new.